So just to start off, thank you so much for being here. We're really excited to host this panel for a variety of reasons. I personally had an amazing time interning at many different companies when I was your age, many years ago. But also, transitioning from internships to full-time jobs can be really challenging. There's a lot of information out there, there's a lot of things to consider, and we took some time to pick a really great selection of panelists who all work at Stripe right now in different capacities, and who I've been like super happy and lucky to work with in a few different ways. So to introduce myself, my name is Raylene, and I'll be the moderator for the panel. I joined Stripe about 2 years ago, and today I lead our applications engineering group. So basically I manage a team of around, actually I'm not sure, around 70 or 80 engineers and product managers, and we build a suite of Stripe's full stack products. In a past life, I interned at a bunch of places like Google and research at Stanford, at IBM, and even a hedge fund once upon a time. So I'm a big fan of internships, and I'm really glad that you are all clearly spending some time at probably some awesome companies this summer. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to each person on the panel is going to take some time to just introduce themselves and tell you a little bit about themselves.
Cool, thanks. My name is Alex, and I work at Stripe as a front-end engineer on the dashboard platform team. I went to Stanford for undergrad and graduated in 2012. Studied computer science and concentration in human-computer interaction. So I really like design stuff too. Let's see what else we're supposed to talk about. Past internships. Oh, past internships. So I had only one where I programmed at, which is I interned at a really small startup, like less than 10 people, of a bunch of people from Stanford called Nutrivise. Anybody heard of that? No, that's okay. They were interested in building an app that tells you where healthy meals are nearby, which is actually a really cool idea. I think they got acquired by Jawbone. So. And then for anyone interested, like I've also worked at a biofuels lab. I was really interested in like chemistry, chemical engineering before.
Hi, everybody. I'm Amber. I'm one of the engineering managers here as well. I was an EECS major at Berkeley. Go Bears. Anybody? Okay. I see some people. And I actually joined Stripe as a new grad. I've been here about 5.5 years now, so it's been a really long time. And during that time, I've worked on everything from helping design the first versions of our API to building, I think, the initial versions of many of our products. Right now, I find myself working on a team called Treasury, which is super cool. We basically build infrastructure for handling all of Stripe's money, which, if you think about Stripe's business, is like a lot of like complexity in terms of funds flows. Yeah.
Hey, I'm Priya. I went to university at Imperial College London, and I am now at Stripe on the Risk Eng team. Risk Eng works really closely with Risk Ops, and we're a team altogether that basically stop the bad guys from trying to cache cards and steal money from on Stripe. Before I joined Stripe, I was an intern at a defense electronics company up in Scotland. And I did a second internship at Google, and then I did my last internship at Stripe, where I was here for 6 months, and I did 3 months on risk and then 3 months on security. And now I'm full-time.
I'm Susan, Stanford 1516, I guess with concentrations in systems and theory. And the other questions were, I'm on product infra. We build, I guess, better tools and like work on abstractions to help product engineers iterate faster. I've only been on the team for like 2 months, and before that I was on a product team for about a year. And the places I interned at before I came here were in reverse order, Facebook London. London? Okay. But cool. And now I can't remember where I interned at. Twitter and Google and HP Labs before that.
Great. So kind of you talked a lot about the different things you work on here and your past internships. And one thing I think that's really great to hear a little bit more about is just digging in a little more into the work that you've done. So does anyone have kind of a high impact project that you can think about that was really formative for you, or had just through working on it, you learned something kind of very valuable that would be worth sharing?
I can take this one. One project. So I forgot to say this. I've only been working at Stripe for 4 months, and so the most impactful project I've worked on, at least from my perspective, has been my spin-up project, which actually was a part of the dashboard, which is great, because it's the team that I'm on. But outside of that, I learned a lot about how much impact you can have in such a little amount of time. So the project I worked on was building UI for the dashboard for one of our products, which is Connect. Anyone familiar with Connect? Oh, kind of? Okay, I'll explain it though. Nice, Hillary knows what Connect is. Basically, Connect is a product that we use to help transfer payments between, a good example is Lyft, between platform and a bunch of other users like drivers. And in order to transfer money, Stripe needs to confirm things about these payees, their social security number, things that make sure that we're in lines with different compliance requirements. So before that, you can only do that through the API, which meant big companies like Lyft and stuff had to build their own UI just to support their business, which is not what we want to do. We want to do that for them. And so that's what I worked on as a new hire. I didn't know hardly anything about Connect, or which is a pretty complicated product, or much about compliance requirements or anything like that. But I was able to learn basically at Stripe how to get answers to those questions to make the best product decisions, and launch this really useful product that companies like Lyft were excited about. A lot of user ops, people on our user ops team that support a lot of our users were excited about, because they get so many tickets, asking for help uploading, driver's license and things like that, other identification documents.
I've got another one, if we've got time. So when I was an intern, one of the projects I worked on was building a framework called Excelsior. And I'm pretty confident in saying that most people at Stripe have used this tool. And it was pretty cool to build, mainly because I was working on it end to end, and it enables people to take tasks that they would have run on the command line and just run it through a UI. So it sounds really simple, but back in the old days of Stripe, way back in the old days, if someone wrote in and they said, hey, I want to change my email address from bob@gmail.com to bob@yahoo.com, for example, a support person would have to go and look for a document that said how to change it. Then they would have to SSH into a machine. They would have to open up a REPL. They would have to copy and paste commands from the document. And they would have to change the old email address to bob@gmail, and then change the new email address to bob@yahoo. And this is really, really scary, because now you've given someone who doesn't know who's not familiar with programming, access to a production machine and all of your users' data. So it's scary for them, because they're what am I going to do? Am I going to break something? Before you make a save, you have to type the command become unsafe, which is scary, yes. And also, it's hard for engineers, because now when they want to do something, an engineer will go and they'll be oh, you just need to run this command, and then they'll add a command to this massive documents of commands, and it becomes really easy as tasks get more complicated to do something wrong. So we made a framework, so it's really, really easy for an engineer to add a task, and all you'll do is write the code you want to run, and you would write the fields that the task would take in, and the framework would auto-generate the front end, which is amazing if you're an engineer, because no one likes writing front end code, apart from the few people that do like writing front end code. So it would auto-generate all of that for you, and you could just straight away run your task, and it made things a lot safer for everyone. And it's kind of cool, because I did this when I was an intern, which all of you guys are now, and it's still used everywhere across the company today.
Cool. So thanks for sharing. So you kind of touched on this a little bit, how scary it can be sometimes landing in a new code base, having access to a lot of data that maybe you don't even know what it all is. So I think all of you have gotten familiar, jumped into new code bases. When starting a new job, maybe it's the code base or even anything, how do you think about asking for help and ramping yourself up?
I think less for ramping up and more specifically for asking for help. So if you're anything like me, I've spent so much time just like banging my head on a specific problem, like several hours, just because like I feel a little bit like, I don't know, sometimes you can feel sheepish asking your mentor or your spin-up buddy because you don't want to like waste their time, or you don't want to like think badly of you for like asking some question. So I found like one really useful tactic is to actually time box yourself. So time is something where you like sort of like set a time limit for how long you will spend on something. And I found that this is actually really useful because like when you're really frustrated with the problem, you're just like continually debugging something, you kind of like spiral into like frustratingness. So this, number one, keeps you sane because you kind of have this like light at the end of the tunnel that you like, okay, no matter where I end up, I will ask somebody in 10 minutes. So it's one, really good for your sanity. Second of all, I think really forces you to look into the problem because you're like, okay, I'm gonna look into it for like 10 minutes, and proves to the person that you're asking, like your mentor, that you really put in the time to look into it, and like maybe came prepared with some research, which I think is like really respectful for their time. And third, helps you, I guess, like understand the problem better, if that makes sense. It's kind of like when you are doing problem sets, and it's like much better for you to get really stuck on a problem set and then see the answer rather than just see the answer like from the very beginning. So I think I at least found that tactic useful, just because I found myself wasting a lot of time just like being too afraid to ask.
Yeah, I guess I would just second that. Like, I kind of felt the same way, just starting out, especially because like at school, like the code bases you're given aren't really that big, so you're like, oh, I can just read it myself. I don't need to go ask the TA. But like if you start at a company of like this size or bigger, it's like very reasonable that like you might, your project might have some weird interactions with some piece of infrastructure that some other team owns, and if you don't know why something is like hanging and like not giving you any responses, like it's very reasonable to go and just ask them.
I really like grapping. I grep through the code base for everything. Be careful, as code bases get bigger, you'll find functions with the same name. So make sure you're grepping for the right thing. But generally, like, if you just like grep through everything, then you can like see how things jump from file to file, and then you just like generate a bigger picture of everything. Also, like looking at the history of a file is really, really useful. So like if you're on GitHub or whatever your tool is, seeing who made changes before that and like looking at their diff, because you can see all the places where they made all the relevant changes, and it's like a very good way to get a good cross-section.
Oh, C tags also.
Yes.
Set up your C tags if you have not. It's sort of like, it's a really easy way, if you've been probably available Emacs, I don't know if anybody uses Emacs, where you jump from, if you're reading code, you can jump directly from the method call to the definition. It's a really great tool.
Yeah, I mean, I think in general, lots of dev tips you can pick up from your environment, and I think those are some great points. I really like the timer question or self-timer approach. I have also done that myself. So kind of on that note, now you've all been working. A few of you at multiple companies, a few of you at Stripe, even for multiple years. Can share a little bit about something that went really well in your work so far, kind of a big success that you've had or a big learning opportunity?
Clearly no one's learned anything.
I might prompt you, but actually one thing kind of to share. So Alex mentioned that she did a software engineering internship, but was actually a product manager for a while, right? Oh, right. And I, just to share, I remember when I met Alex, it was really great just talking through kind of the way that she had learned product development from the other side, not just being an engineer, but also being a product manager. So I don't know if you want to share anything from that.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, so before I worked at Stripe, I worked as a product manager for a year and a half, and actually before that I was an engineer, so I took a brief kind of rotation as a product manager, and the reason why I did that is because I felt very limited as an engineer at the companies I worked at previously, where I didn't get a chance to really contribute to the product and stuff, and I saw how impactful like product managers, and at this company I was at, product managers also functioned as engineering managers, how much impact they were able to have as far as like team productivity and like the types of things that we actually release. So I wanted to do that. I wanted to learn like how difficult it was to do that and see if I could really also, have the same positive impact. And from that, I learned a lot of different things, mainly around communication, but things like how to, explain things to people who, so I was a product manager at a nonprofit, so I worked with no one else who was technical. So a lot of stuff I had to explain in very creative ways that really related to things that they already knew. Very important things too, like what I perceive the impact to be, or like how risky something is, and things to help understand whether or not this is the type of project that they want to take on at this moment. I also learned a lot about how to really like not compromise, which I think is like something I default to, but I think it's important sometimes when you have a very strong belief and you have a lot of research or reasons why you believe that, you have to kind of like help figure out a way to convince people to get on your side, like convince them to buy into your idea. And I think that's a very useful skill, especially like at Stripe, where we really work collaboratively. So a lot of engineers have the ability to influence product, influence design, but you need to sort of be able to speak to them in their language, right? And like cater to the things that they really care about. So yeah.
Cool. So kind of to change topics a little bit, to kind of bring it to where you guys are all at, so thinking about how do you go from intern to full-time software engineer. So all of these lovely panelists have done it. But in particular, I'm curious to hear from Susan and Priya, who are kind of the most recently were interns, I think, of the four of you. So what, can you tell us a little bit about what you've learned from your past internships, and maybe how you think they may have helped you make the transition to full-time?
Yeah, I think one of the best things about doing a whole bunch of internships, so I did 3 before I joined Stripe full-time, is it's a really good way to learn what you don't like and what you do like. But I learned that, so I went to Google and I was working on probably the coolest project in my office. I was in Krakow, so it's actually not that big of an office. But it was really, really exciting. I got given a Google Glass and I was doing some fun stuff with that. But after I got over the excitement, I realized all I was doing was writing Android code, and I'd done a whole bunch of that before. So I wasn't learning anything new, and honestly, I could have done the whole summer from my bedroom, and it really wouldn't have made a difference. So I learned that one thing I did want to do was always learn something new, and I wanted to not just be doing like tiny projects that made like very little impact, but I wanted to be working on something that people would use that actually made an impact that wouldn't be like deleted as soon as I left. And it was like all these learning experiences from like all my different internships that made me realize that Stripe is a good fit because I can do X, Y, and Z, whereas at other companies I couldn't. So for me, it was just learning about the things I did not like.
I guess one thing I learned a couple years ago was to don't guess and definitely write tests. So I guess if you come across a thing that you think is an existing bug, but it doesn't make any of the tests failed. I once tried to submit a PR to someone that was just basically fixing what I thought was an existing bug, but there was no failing test. And my reviewer was like, you need to write a test, like, if you think this is an existing thing, write a test that fails without the fix and passes with the fix. So I guess things about like being rigorous. And then also that like, I guess in school people tell you a lot that you shouldn't write code that is like confusing or like does like really magical things that someone else will have trouble like figuring out later. But I think like having worked with like a little bit of that code in my internships, and there's still some of it now, like sort of drove that home. Just like having to find some bug later and or some weird interaction between your code and like some sort of like clever code, like sort of drove home like just make it understandable.
So it sounds like the internships really gave you a chance to kind of like try something out in a new environment and learn what you like and don't like, but also potentially a good learning first test ground for making your first mistakes or kind of learning a few good developer habits. So that sounds really great. Kind of to turn it a little bit, so you did your internships, maybe you kind of messed things up a little bit or learned from your mistakes. Transitioning to full-time, in the end, still is very different from interning somewhere? I think, people kind of nodding on this side, you won't know yet. But I'm curious to hear, like, what were the most difficult challenges that you've had when you did make that switch from intern to full-time? And some of you are earlier in it, of course, in your careers. And on the positive side, what do you think helped you overcome those challenges?
So I think for me, they're both the same, and that's asking why and asking for help. When you're an intern, it's like totally okay to just say, I don't understand. Someone explains it to you, and then 5 minutes later, you're like, yeah, I still don't understand. And you can do this like all day long, and it's fine because you're the intern, right? And then when you become a full-timer, you're like, oh, maybe I shouldn't be doing this now. But I think remembering that it's okay to ask why, because if you don't understand something or you're on a different page to someone you're working with, then that can like just set you back a lot in your progress, because you're both trying to achieve the same thing, but they're actually two different things. So remembering that you can ask why and you should ask why and make sure you're on the same page with people, I think is really important. Yeah, I also forgot what the question was. I think I had something else to say.
It was, what were challenges and what are tips to overcome those challenges?
I guess I feel like I'm still overcoming this challenge, but like speaking up, like having been like a pretty quiet person at school, and that not having been like really that much of a problem at internships, just because you have like a mentor who's like kind of responsible for like setting things up a little bit for you, and if you need to like reach out to another team, like usually they were like sort of happy to like come along with me to the meeting, or like even just like reach out for me. I think like two pieces of advice I got from my manager were, one, if you're on like a really vocal team and you like feel like it's like weird to interrupt, like you can just like let your manager know that you might like just like do this or something like during the meeting if you want to interrupt. And since they're moderating the discussion, they can like help you like make sure you get like your word in. And the other thing is, like, even if you don't see yourself ever becoming like super extroverted and vocal, like if you can just like get to like a baseline level of like literal vocalness, and then like beyond that, like you can make yourself heard in other ways, like just like comment on other people's work, or like send emails and things like that.
I think that's a good reminder too. When you switch to full-time, you have a manager that has a very different relationship than your typical intern mentor. And as an engineering manager, Amber is one as well. If you want to chime in on anything on the management perspective, feel free. But I think it is very different when you think about managing someone on your team rather than kind of hosting them for a summer. So it's really great that Susan was able to work with her manager to help give her that tip and work better with the rest of her team. Keeping an eye, okay, we good on time. Is there anything you have observed from managing people making the transition from intern to full-time that would be helpful to share?
Well, I guess like less so specifically from a manager's perspective. I was actually just thinking one really nice thing about, I guess could be from the manager's perspective too, from transitioning from intern to full-time, is you actually get to like settle down a little bit more. And I don't mean just like putting plants on your desk. I mean like you start thinking longer term, both about your project, right? Because when you're doing an internship, you're kind of like artificially limited by this like 3-4 month period. You're like, oh, like I kind of want, like I'm very interested in thinking about that area, but like I'm never gonna get to that. Or, oh, I really want to take this project here, but I mean, everyone's telling me to de-scope, so I guess I shouldn't do that. So I think the nice thing about full-time is really you get to think about, okay, what are the areas that you want to, either for your project and technically like own long-term, or areas that you're interested in, and you just get a much longer time horizon to do that. And you can have plants on your desk that are long-lived.
Yeah. Cool. So, we talked about this, transitioning intern to full-time, but how do you pick your full-time job, right? I think we're all you all work at very different companies, and most of us, I would assume, made some sort of choice to end up at Stripe. So I'm curious, like, what factors did you consider when you chose Stripe to work for, but also in general, like, what advice would you give to the room on how they should think about choosing their first full-time job?
I can go. So I think overall, like because you're so early in your career, you really want to focus on learning, right? Learning is one of those things that just like really, really compounds over time. Kind of to Priya's point, where like either try something new or sort of like become an expert in some area or just like start your path toward that. I've often had people ask me, so I decided to join Stripe, which is a very small company at the time. I think it was about 10 people when I joined. But I was also trying to decide whether I wanted to join a larger company, kind of like the Google, Facebook types. And usually I feel like I've thought a little bit about this, and I think that, I mean, there are obviously exceptions in both cases, but in larger sort of like larger companies, you get a lot more depth. So say you want to do sort of like machine learning specifically, or like you want to do like AI, you just get a lot more like very deep into the technical expertise, and there are probably like experts in the area to help you. You get a lot more mentorship. In a small company, you get a lot more breadth. You're like, okay, well now you're the salesperson, or like now you're like the PM, and now you're the designer. And some people just like, and ownership, I think overall, right? Just because it's like, if you're a fast-growing company, it's like hectic times, very exciting, sometimes stressful as well. So I think in terms of like choosing between those two, it really depends on what you want, and I think it's a very personal decision, right? So I obviously chose a small company. I've had friends who like really wanted to focus in an area and have been like very, very happy at Google because they really turned into the experts in their area.
Yeah, I think adding on to the learning point, one thing I would strongly recommend is like no matter where you choose to go, you should always seek out the opportunities where you can learn. So even if that means going and doing the tasks that no one else wants to do and like crawling away and figuring out how things work so you can learn from it, like that's worth it, because learning will just help you with everything. You see something once, you're going to see it again a million times, and it's just as you become a more senior software engineer, it's like, oh, I know how to do this because, not because you read it in a book, but because you've seen it 5 million times before, and now you're just seeing a variation on it. But for me, one of the most important things when I was choosing where I wanted to go full-time was the pajama test. And that was, can I come here in my pajamas and feel comfortable? Because I'm really, really chill. Like, I don't ever want to go to work in a suit, which Susan knows. I just want to feel comfortable. Like, can I sit on the floor by my desk and do my work? Will anyone judge me, think I'm weird? And at Stripe, turns out, yes, you can do all of the above. You can walk around the office barefoot. In fact, half the office does it. So that was really important. And I think making sure you're at a place where you really like the people is important, because everywhere you go, like, you're going to be doing work, and maybe it'll be like tilde similar because you're doing machine learning, so you're going to be doing some form of it in one way or another. And I think at Stripe, it's the people that really make it. Like, I'm not a huge San Francisco fan, but I love coming into the office to hang out with these guys. Like, they make it, so you should always strive to find somewhere where you're like going to want to come in and hang out with the people you work with, because I think that's very important.
Cool. I just want to add a couple of things. I think that like, well, someone told me this actually when I was like just starting into school or into full-time work. I should really, when finding or picking a job, you should really think about people, product, and position. I think we've already kind of talked about the people aspect. Like, it's very important to like the people that you work with, feel comfortable with them, feel like you can ask them help and stuff like that. I think the other two are also really important. So the next thing I mentioned was the product. So this doesn't have to necessarily be like, you know, UI product in a sense, but whatever you're working on, make sure that it's something that's like really exciting, something that you know can't wait to work on, something that like has a big impact in the world. Like, you actually like the impact it makes. You know, I have friends that work in banking, and like they hate it. Like, they hate like banking, and it's like, you know, you can avoid that if you actually like prioritize what you're working on, and like how it makes you feel. I think also, like, if it matters to you, like how many people use your product, right? Like, take that into account as well, right? Like, some people really like the idea that, like, you know, they work on something that, like, you know, billions of people use, right? Like a very large company like Facebook. And then like the third thing is the position. So it's really important to make sure you like understand the role that you'll be taking on at the company, not just necessarily like your title, but like what, as you're joining the team, like what do they feel like you are going to help them best with, right? And make sure like that aligns with what you want to do. Like, outside of like what you contribute, like, you know, in writing code and stuff, you also play a role on a team. Like there's a team dynamic. There's certain people who are going to be very, you know, like everyone has their own beliefs about like how code should be written and stuff like that. You know, a lot of people want to write code really, really fast and want to ship things really, really fast. Some people are going to be a little bit more on the side of like, you know, aiming for, you know, code quality, you know, make sure everything is rigorously tested. So like you want to understand like your team, like what they feel like is important and like what role you're going to play. Sometimes like they may bring you in because you are different than the rest of the team and they want to bring some of that to the team. And so just make sure you're comfortable with that type of role where you would maybe have to, you know, teach people about like testing or something like TDD or something that there's like a way of coding that they're not familiar with. Yeah, and then the last thing I would like to add is something that like I feel like is really important, but I don't hear often enough is compensation, and like not just on a just salary like level, but I think it's really important that you feel like you know your worth first, like know how much you know the market, know like what people are offering, and then like make sure you're like calibrating yourself accordingly based on your experiences and stuff. I think that's really, really important because I think like a lot of times people just act like it's not a thing, but it's like totally a thing. Yeah.
Can I add one more thing really quickly? If you know what you want in the future, and I think everyone here who's like doing CS degrees or like interested in CS, you're like in this really, really cool place where you're actually able to build things yourself and create things out of nothing or out of other people's tools and, you know, build on the shoulders of their stuff. So if you know that that's something you want to do, like build your own startup, then don't be afraid to work at a company. If you have a dream and you're like, okay, I know I want to do this, I know I want to found a company at some point, then you can also like choose to sell your soul to the devil and grind it out at a bank for like 4 or 5 years, make some bank, and then like go away and do your own thing. So like if you have a dream and you know your passion for the future, you should always make sure that whatever you choose, even if it doesn't seem like the best thing in the short term, you should go for it. And whether that means like grinding it out somewhere you don't like or taking like a disgusting pay cut because you believe in a dream and you want to work on that product, then don't be scared of doing that as well.
I think we have just, you know, we'll end with one last thing and then open it up to questions. So I will plant this question because I think it's a good one. So for Amber, we mentioned earlier, Amber is an engineering manager here, which means she helps recruit other engineers to Stripe. So this is probably top of mind for all of you. Amber, like, what do you think we look like? It makes sense to look for in an intern or a new grad hire.
Yeah. At the risk of sounding somewhat generic, I think the things, because Stripe is, and most companies are such like, well, like ownership and sort of like oriented sort of like companies. I think that for us, like we really value, and the things that I look for and am the most impressed with are like a lot of initiative and sort of like really an eagerness to learn, a humility that you don't know everything like starting out, and eagerness to like have impact. So I think the like interns and new grads that I have been the most impressed with are the ones who can really I think get ramped up really quickly and sort of like really drive a project independently. And by independently, I don't mean like just by themselves and they're the best and they're going to do it all themselves. It's just like really collaborative. You know what questions to ask. You have to start small somewhere. So like I think your first project, just like do it really, really well and then slowly build up to that. And I think the people who do that the best, we see start to take more and more leadership opportunities at the company. The skill sets, I think, are there's some level of sort of like a base technical, whatever you want to call it, like skill level, right? But I think the important things are actually organization. Being organized is not lame. It's like super impressive and cool if you're like extremely on top of your stuff. I think there's like a stigma around like, oh, like why are you taking notes? That's so lame. Yeah, just generally like be really organized. I think I'm super impressed when like an intern new grad, they're like, okay, here's my plan. I've done everything. Here's what I'm gonna do. Here's what the impact is. And then kind of like what I would almost call like a critical thinking bit, like not critical thinking in the SAT, but like, or I guess it's critical reading. But really like how do you know that your project is going? Is your project going well? First of all, how do you know it's going well? Are you able to? Are you unafraid to sort of like think of all the things like that are risks or blockers? Do you like raise that very frequently with your manager? So I think that like really the more important parts are not necessarily how like badass you are of an architecture like person, but really like how well do you think about your projects and executing them really well. And you start small, right? But I think those people we see take on more and more responsibility and have more and more impact in the company.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. So now I think we can open up to questions. I believe there's a mic. Okay, great. So if you have a question, just raise your hand and we'll come give you a mic.
Hi, my name is Sweta. First of all, thank you so much for giving us this talk. So all of you sound like very successful women, but how do you deal with, or how have you dealt with imposter syndrome, especially being in this industry, being minorities? Like, just how do you go about that, and what tips do you have for us?
Crap, I'm holding the mic.
Yeah, that's a great question. Imposter syndrome is very, very tough to deal with because I kind of think it never goes away, unfortunately. Like, and I think that's more of not necessarily anything to do with like you as an individual. It's just sort of like the way society is structured and the amount of doubt that people have, you know, based on like judgments that they make when they see you. For me, what I find helpful is, you know, finding someone that you can like, you know, basically vent to, just to get the things that are happening to you like out of your head. And I think from there, like whenever like I have a, you know, a self-doubting thought, I try to counter it with like a positive one. So I have to be like very mindful of like, you know, checking in with myself, seeing how I react to things, and trying to catch it in the moment, so that like, you know, if I do, you know, say like, oh man, that was like dumb, like why did I do that? Like try to counter it with a positive thought, like, you know, no, like, you know, it was just a mistake, you know, like happens to everyone, like no one's perfect, like that's okay, just like learn from it, do better, like trying to basically train yourself to stop doing that, to at least be more mindful of your thoughts and try to counter it with positive thoughts is like what's been helping me.
I think just staying true to yourself is like really, really important. And for me, it's like having people outside of work or in work who I feel very comfortable with and who I feel like I can be myself with all the time. And then kind of once you've got that, you can kind of let it bleed into everything else and just like carry on being who you are. Yeah, I think that's just really important.
One random tip I picked up over the years in my career, not quite on the imposter syndrome note, but in general, something I often do when I meet people for the first time is take a minute to introduce myself. I think a lot of times you enter a room and you're just kind of trying to enter into some conversation. And it can be an incredibly great way to start a conversation, to just be like, hi, my name is Raylene, I work on this, like tell me a bit about you. I think that is great regardless of gender or anything like that, but it's a really nice way of just resetting yourself into, okay, this is who I am and this is what I do, now let's start, working together. So that's a tip that I started doing years ago and have really never stopped.
One thing I really want to add too is like, for me, I always celebrate all victories, no matter how big or small they are. And I think that like, in general, like, I think as a society, we don't do a good enough job of like being positive. So I think like taking the time when you do something really cool, or someone gives you positive feedback on a code review, or just positive feedback in general, just take the time to accept it, like embrace it. Don't try to shy away from the moment. And I think that also helps with imposter syndrome.
Have you ever had an experience in a toxic work environment? and what steps do you take to avoid such environments?
I definitely have. I think that I haven't always done the best job of that. I think particularly because when you're in a toxic work environment, you often it's hard to actually take a step back and see it for what it is, because you're kind of caught up in the everyday, issues within the organization, whether it's like a person or just the way the company is structured, where you can't actually get work done, or it's just unclear exactly like where you stand as far as like your performance and stuff like that. Honestly, I think the best thing to do, well, at least what I did was I started going to therapy because I just noticed the changes in my behavior, and talking to another person that wasn't a part of it, I think just helped me see what was actually going on. It just gave me another perspective. Before that, I would just complain with my coworkers and stuff like that, and it wasn't I think we just started to take it as for granted, oh, this is the way things are. But talking to someone that's outside of it can help you see that oh, actually, this isn't okay, this isn't okay. And then I think it helped me anyway figure out what are the next steps to basically try to change it or get out of there.
I think just having been kind of on the management side for a while, I think a big failure mode is people feeling like they're alone. They don't have anyone to talk to, or they're not sure what to do. I do think if the company has good values and HR team, I think it's important to actually seek help or at least consult people at the company, starting with your manager. Of course, maybe there are just other people, but HR is always a resource. And I think the biggest mistake is to not do anything, not to say anything at all, and just kind of assume this is just how things are. So yeah, that's the advice I'd give.
Hi, I'm Sarah. I'm doing a computer science degree at Oregon State. It seems like a lot of you have a pretty diverse sort of skill set, which is super cool because I like to think that I do too. But sometimes when I'm applying for positions, it seems like I'm competing against people who are kind of hyper optimized towards whatever they're looking for in anything. So how do you kind of leverage your diverse background and kind of sell yourself and market yourself as being able to offer lots of things?
I can. Okay. I can.
Brave one.
I can talk about that a little bit. That's a great question. I think that you're right, because you do have to tailor yourself to a particular job opportunity, because there's a barrier between you and the team that you'll be working on, which is recruiting, right? Recruiting doesn't always know exactly what the team needs. They just kind of know this translated version based on the job description and stuff like that. So you have to kind of meet that bar, and then I think the closer you can get to talking to people on the team or hiring managers and stuff like that, a better sense of you'll have a better sense of what that role actually requires. So I think that which also is hard to do, right? How do you get the chance to meet people like that? And the best answer is kind of building your network. Yeah, I think that would be the way I would try to go about doing it. I think you also should understand exactly what the team is looking for, because I kind of see myself as a generalist, and there are, depending on the size of the company, for example, those things are really, really valuable. Definitely on the smaller sides of the company. So I think it's about really understanding more about the stage the company is at and what that team is specifically looking for. Yeah.
And I will say something from the hiring manager perspective is I am definitely not always looking for hyper optimized people. And I was just talking about what we look for in new hires, and it's really not all about the tech and how many specific like things have you built, right? I think a lot of it is honestly these soft skills that make people really successful. And I think of myself, and even though I think of myself as a generalist, but even I have like a computer science degree. Many of the earliest engineers at Stripe did not have computer science degrees. They came from like economics or like English or something like that. I think it's really what can you do with the skill set that you have. Like right now, whether it's like you did a really great job of organizing this support group, or like you're really involved in some kind of other program, right? I think it's definitely not all about the tech, and the more you can sort of like show your passion or your skill set in other areas, I think that is very helpful.
Okay, so you mentioned that you wanted to always learn while you're working. One thing I have trouble with is asking for a project in an area I'm like not very familiar with. So how do you approach that, and how do you frame it so like it's a benefit to the company as well?
So I think it depends on the size of the company. So if we're going for somewhere that's like Stripe-sized, at least for me on my team, if there's something I want to learn, so my team does everything full stack. And when I got here like a year ago, I had never done any React before. And I was actually scared of it because I was like, I actually have no idea how this works. So at first it was like, oh, I will take that thing, because like it was just like this thing in React, and it's like if I do this one thing, maybe I can learn how to do it. So then I would, after I've like said I'm going to take the task, start off with something small in this new area you want to learn. You can always ask someone for help. Say, look, I've never done this before. How do I go about doing this? And also, like for something like React, you can just read docs online as well. So that's like one way to go about it. And then like after I'd taken a small task, I was like ready to take on another smaller task, and then a bit of a bigger task. And then before you know it, I'm like happy to do React components end to end. And I'm like, I actually understand how this stuff works now. Like I understood it so well I could explain it to our intern. Which was awesome, because like it meant like I had understood something, which was really cool. But if it's like a completely different area or like a different team, I think a good way is to just start talking to people on that team and be like, oh, hey, how does this work? And just like learning how it works on like a semantic level, even if you don't understand how the code is structured and how the code works. And then based on that, you can say, hey, I would like to try and help with this. And then at that point, you already have like some knowledge in your head of like how things are laid out. So everything isn't new to you, and you don't actually have to jump into this like new pond. You have some familiarity. You get me. Words.
Yeah, kind of. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna say, I think like this is like a great question, because I feel like I learned a lot about how to do that from being a product manager. So the better like you can really articulate the value of whatever you want to work on, like not just from like from a company standpoint, like why would other people care about this? Like why is this beneficial to your team? Or being able to really think about or come up with like reasons why, I think helps people get excited about what you're working on, and helps like drive buy-in, so that you'll have the support to work on that. So I think like, yeah, spending some time like talking to other people about, who may be in different like teams or something, about like what you're excited about, and maybe trying to like, pick their brain and see like, oh, like how could this be helpful for you, or, stuff like that. Maybe even learning more about some of the problems that they have, and like seeing if you can shape a project based around that problem, for example.
Is that, we're done? All right. Yeah, so that's all we have time for, but thanks a lot for coming, and we'll kind of stick around for a bit, and you can find us and chat with us one-on-one. Great, thank you.